It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. This is a photograph captured yesterday, shortly after Donald Trump's meeting with war criminal Vladimir Putin on U.S. soil, of a Russian armored vehicle inside Ukraine, part of an assault in the Zaporizhia region, flying an American and a Russian flag side by side. Last Friday, we reported on Trump's humiliation in Alaska and Putin's massive propaganda win there. I talked about how the Russian media is now calling Trump and America a Russian ally. But I never thought I'd see an American flag on a Russian assault vehicle in a war zone, an area of Ukraine I've been to, by the way. Today, President Zelensky visited the White House in an attempt to undo some of the catastrophic damage that Trump has inflicted on Ukraine. I hope there is a positive outcome, but I place no faith at all in Trump to do the right thing. He is obsessed with the great power theory of diplomacy, in which he and other strongmen can just carve up the world into spheres of influence. Trust me, Ukraine will not let that happen, even if they have to fight on alone with kitchen knives. I spoke with Adam Kinzinger about this. He's one of the few Republicans who has stood firm with Ukraine, and he understands Ukraine and Russia in ways that most of his former colleagues do not. He also sees clearly just how weak, how beta, in his words, our president truly is. In part one of my conversation with Adam last week, we talked about the massive propaganda win for Putin that the meeting in Alaska would deliver. We were right on every count. In part two, we talk about what Putin and Trump get wrong about Ukraine and how the Republican Party has completely emasculated itself by bowing to a man like Donald Trump. Here's our conversation. It goes back to schoolyard politics. How do you deal with the bully? You don't keep indulging them, you stand up to them. And look, it's one of my biggest gripes against the Biden administration. They PowerPointed their way through the defense of Ukraine when they should have, I'm making this up on the spot, but they should have Churchilled their way through it, right? Sometimes you just have to make a moral decision and say, this is right, this is wrong, and we're going to stand on the side of right. Can you talk a little bit about the Ukrainian people? Because the other thing that the whole great power approach gets wrong is the agency of the Ukrainians. They're not going to let the Russians, much less the U.S., dictate what happens to their occupied territories.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, look, back when I got one of the very first intel briefings, I was still in Congress when, basically they knew that Russia was going to attack. And one of the things the CIA and stuff was saying, they thought Ukraine would collapse in a week or two, but they said, look, the Ukrainian people will engage in basic guerrilla warfare. And we were, as a nation, going to transition to supplying this guerrilla warfare effort. Maybe it took a decade to do it. Now, obviously, that didn't come to fruition. But what that shows is that at least we vaguely understood the will of the Ukrainian people, which is, look, they don't see themselves as Russian. They see themselves, even Russian-speaking Ukrainians see themselves as much as of Russia as we do of England here in the United States of America. We share a language, but that doesn't mean we're British. And that's the same thing with Ukraine. They see themselves now. They have developed a national identity. Not only have they developed it, they fought for 3.5 years for it. That's a whole nother thing. They have now spilled blood in the service of a national identity. They're not going to give up. And if they end up having to throw rocks at, occupying Russian soldiers, they'll do that. If they end up having to sneak up on them from behind at night, they'll do that. Thankfully, I believe they won't have to resort to that. But the Ukrainian spirit is not going to give up. And look, man, these are just fantastic people. This is the other thing, like as Americans, and as Europeans, we've got to look and say, this is the largest country in the continent of Europe, besides Russia, if that's even considered Europe. And they are naturally more aligned to our values than almost any other country I can think of in their aspiration. They're not going to lose. The question is, how many more Ukrainians have to die until Russia realizes this is a futile effort?
I remember in the opening week of the invasion, talking to one of the defenders of Odessa who described showing up to the recruiting station and seeing grandmothers with kitchen knives ready to defend their city. And this is a Russian-speaking city inside Ukraine that is every bit as Ukrainian as every other part of Ukraine, including the occupied regions. Hey, it's Ken Harbaugh. Quick break to say thank you to everyone who's been following and supporting this show and this channel. None of it happens without you. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my Substack page, I'd really appreciate the follow. It's a great way to make sure you never miss an episode. It's free to sign up. And if you're able to pitch in a few bucks, every dollar goes back into the show. Just search for The Ken Harbaugh Show on Substack or click the link below. Thanks. Last question, because you had a tweet or maybe a Blue Sky post recently that jumped out at me. I don't have it pulled up, but you were talking about I'm going to paraphrase, but the emasculation of the Republican Party and the fact that Donald Trump, as alpha as he projects and as much as he is puffed up by the Republicans around him, he is as beta as they come. What has happened, man, to the party of defense, of strength, of masculinity? I mean, it's a stunt these days.
It is. I mean, look, I think the definition of masculinity has been perverted. Part of it is the fault of men because we did not defend masculinity for the last 15 years. We allowed some to call masculinity toxic, which I think created an environment that is what we're seeing today, where so many young men are going for this Andrew Tate thing because they see that as the only definition of masculinity. But as men, it used to be in my grandfather's generation when he was fighting the Nazis, that a man was somebody who went and fought the Nazis, who, farmed, who raised his family, who defended his family, and who, no matter what, look, if the rains didn't come and the corn was wiped out of season, they may be pretty pissed off about it, but they're not going to whine and be a victim about it. It's like, how do we get through this? What the Republican Party has become under the tutelage of Donald Trump, because he's done this his whole life, is a victim of everything. I mean, look, they've 40 years of Fox News culture has convinced kind of, right-wing America that they've been forgotten and left behind. Some of that is true. Most of it isn't. But Donald Trump comes along and says everything bad that happens to you is the fault of somebody else. You're a victim. Let's think about Donald Trump, the most powerful man in the world, reelected to the presidency, by the way, against all odds, right? He's now president of the United States, and he's still a victim of everything? Listen, if you can be president of the United States and still be a victim of whatever is happening to him, either you're the weakest president of the United States, or you're lying, or, the deep state really is that intense. But it's not. He's just a big whiner, and every man that follows him now has come to believe that whining and complaining and tweeting in all caps, and in many cases now disrespecting the military, is somehow manliness, and it's not. It's beta. And let me finish with this. If you look at all of these middle-aged MAGA dudes with their flat-billed caps, wearing their sunglasses in the car as they take a selfie for their profile picture, and they have that, attempted assassination picture of Trump on their little top part of X, and you say, wow, you're such an independent thinker that you literally copied everything every one of you are doing. That is so beta, and I can't think of anything more beta than that.
Well, it's made worse by the fact that Donald Trump has convinced them that the people victimizing them are some of the most marginalized people in our society. Immigrants, trans people. Those are the enemy now. Those are the people who are pressing their thumb down on you. It just fills me with rage. I think there has to be a reckoning, an awakening at some point. But you know what? That's what elections are for. How are you feeling? Last question about the polls and the trends. And is Donald Trump really cratering like it looks he might be?
Look, I think he's taken some hits. He's still a little higher than he was in his first term at this point, which is baffling to me. I feel like Democrats are going to win in 2026. What I worry about is they win despite themselves. Look, I want them to win. I haven't voted Republican in 4 years, but I don't want them to take a lesson that whatever they do, if it's not a good message, is what they need to do in 2028. Because I have not heard, I'll be honest with you, a coherent, solid message from the Democrats. This big, beautiful bill, which is a piece of garbage, I don't hear a consistent message against it. When I was running in 2010 as a Tea Party Republican, we were able to coalesce the message around, remember, the infrastructure or the stimulus bill and the healthcare bill. And we made that the talking point. The Democrats have got to do the same, because this is the worst bill that has passed Congress in 20 years. And if they do that and they can get that message together, I think they're going to crush the Republicans in 2026. And I think they'll win regardless. But that's where I'm at. The last thing I'll say too on that is to everybody watching, the tendency, and I fight this every day, so I'm not like preaching at you. The tendency is to get discouraged, to feel like, well, what's this worth? And oh my God, we can't do anything till 2026. Yes, we live in a society where you get to vote every 2 years, and that's where you have the most impact. There's a lot you can do beside that. But beyond that is the most important fight you can take right now is to keep your energy up and keep your enthusiasm up, and to appreciate the fact that you're in an alliance with people that you probably never would have been in an alliance with before in any other case, because we're in an alliance to defend democracy. And because if you get disheartened and quit, they win because they get energized by this crap. They love what's going on every day. We get exhausted by it. So just keep your head up, keep energized, take a break if you need.
Great note to end on, Adam. Thanks so much. We'll check in again soon.
You bet. Take care, buddy.
New Meidas merch drop. Check out the latest pro-democracy sticker packs, t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and more. All at store.meidastouch.com.